So take the stick out, but if you can, kind of leave the sugar in the packet for a minute. Don't pour it out. Why is it so hard for young people once they start this drug, or any of us if we've really done it for a long time, to get off of the drug? And the problem is called neuroplasticity. It actually is changing the brain. When you do these drugs, chemical changes are occurring in your brain. I'm going to try to explain, I'm going to explain just one of those chemical changes, but there could be lots of them. So this is going to represent what we call a receiving neuron. You have neurons in your brain, and they get activated when chemicals attach to them. So how do chemicals attach to these fun dips? You have to lick them. So lick just half the stick. And you know the rest, right? Dip it into the sugar and pull it out. This is what happens when a neuron has some neurotransmitters attached to it. And that's normal. That's a normal amount of sugar, and that's a normal way to eat a fun dip. So that's how we go through everyday life. But here's what's happened when we take a drug. When we take a drug that crosses the blood-brain barrier and increases the amount of neurotransmitter, and you can try that if you want at your desk, we get this much neurotransmitter. That's not normal. That's an I want to say obscene amount. That's a huge amount of neurotransmitters causing artificial amounts of activation on these neurons, which is why we experience a high. You know, a regular fun dip with a little bit of sugar feels joyous. We feel happy. That's nice. A lot of sugar sitting on top of this, and we get a really, really big jolt of sugar, right? Now, the brain isn't exactly stupid. When you take drugs like this and you do this to the neurotransmitters, it adapts. It changes because it knows that's not healthy. That's not natural, and I can't sustain that. So what it does instead is it dries it out. The neuron, one of the chemical changes that could occur, is it reduces the sticky spots on the receiving neuron so that even if you did dip it back in the sugar again, nothing comes off. Nothing attaches. In a sense, the receiving neuron has kind of dried itself out so that if it ever gets flooded again, it's not going to be overstimulated. That's called neuroplasticity. That's one of the ways the brain adapts to all those artificial chemicals. But here's the other problem then. How does regular life then feel to me? It feels kind of dry. It kind of feels less joy because I can't get that neuron to fire with just normal amounts of sugar, normal amounts of neurochemistry. So as I walk around, I feel less happy than I did before I started taking the drug. And in fact, the brain starts craving that feeling of joy that it had before. It wants that high that it got artificially. So it's going to try to go back to that situation, but now it needs more and more and more because this thing keeps drying out. So it needs more and more neurotransmitters, or in this case, psychoactive drugs, to create a feeling of high. That's the bad news. This neuroplasticity happens more when you're young than when you're old. The brain is still developing all the way up until your early 20s. So this is going to happen faster with young people than old people. And that's why they're going to be more susceptible to addiction. One of the reasons they're going to be more susceptible to addiction. Now, here's some good news. If you intervene in the life of a young person who's struggling with substances, this also adapts faster. This can recover fairly quickly relative to some others, and it can go back to this normal chemistry. Takes some time, takes some resistance, takes a long period of recovery, but it can happen that the brain does recover and people can live a relatively normal life. So hopefully that explains a little bit about what's going on here with drug addiction.